All right. Hello again, Avengers. Welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 180, guys. I've been doing this for 6 months. Technically, I've been doing it for 7 months, but I don't count daily December because I do it every year. And have done that every year for 11 years, which is nonsense. So, today, Dawn Trail, the latest expansion for Final Fantasy XIV. Early access launch last night. Got on to play. And this is something that happens basically every other expansion-ish. Is each expansion introduces new classes. And everybody wants to play the new classes. And so whatever roles those classes are, get flooded in the dungeon queue. You can basically queue up to run dungeons and stuff like that. And in order to run a dungeon, you have to have 1 healer, 1 tank, and 2 DPS. So in each new expansion, whichever role has new characters. There's always a new DPS, and then a lot of times they will add either a tank or a healer. Never both. So this expansion, they didn't add either a tank or a healer. They just added 2 new DPSs, the Viper and the Pictomancer. And basically what happened, normally if you queue for a dungeon as a tank or a healer, because they're technically slightly harder roles to play, your queues, like I can get into as a tank, because I tend to main tanks, I can get into a dungeon queue in less than 5 minutes. Your DPS, in general, you're waiting like anywhere between like 8 to 10 minutes. On a really, slow day, you might be in there for 15 or 20. I queued twice for 2 different dungeon queues. The first one, I was in for a little over half an hour. Never got in. The second one, I was in for like 70 or 75 minutes. Never got in. So, yeah, and that's one of the faster ways to kind of catch up in levels is to just run whatever the highest level dungeon is. So that was annoying. That being said, I started playing the Viper class, which is a weird class, to be honest. It's a combo-based class where you have basically 2 different attacks that you can make. And depending on which one you make, it will kind of progress into the end. There's 4 different finishers that you can do at the end of these combos, and each one gives you a different kind of a buff. And the way they explained in game is unbelievably complicated. The way it plays in game is you have 2 buttons that you push, and depending on which buttons you've pushed and the buffs you already have, it will highlight one or both of the buttons, and you push those buttons. And that's all you have to do. Like, it's unbelievably simple to do. They just explain it as this really, really complicated. And yes, there's a little bit more, like a couple of the finishers require you to be, or all the finishers require you to be in certain spots to get the most damage out of it. And I haven't figured out how to tell the difference between them yet. But I'll figure that out eventually. But it made me start the thinking about tabletop RPGs, and the idea of basically combination attacks or combos in tabletop RPGs. I did have some experience with this because if you guys remember years ago now, I did a D&D deep dive series where I covered this thing called the Final Fantasy XIV Cross D&D 5e compendium. And basically what it did is it took all the classes that were currently available in Final Fantasy XIV and it created D&D 5th edition versions of them. And so I did a deep dive, very similar to what I do with Essential Lessons 20. I did a deep dive for every single one of those classes. And one of the classes, the Samurai, was combo based. basically you would do one attack on one turn, and then the next turn you would do another attack, and then the third turn you do another one. Each one was kind of a building point in a combo, and they all got bonuses based on the attack that you did before. And I talked about then how the idea of combination attacks in tabletop RPGs, in video games, combos are extremely common. Ever since like Street Fighter 2, the idea of, hitting a bunch of what should be kind of completely separate attacks in a certain combination can lead to good things. They started off mostly in fighting games, and then getting into action games, and then eventually making it in to RPGs in general, because as RPGs tended to skew more towards the action RPG genre, you just started seeing, because it's a lot more fun, instead of just mashing the same button over and over again, if you alternated the buttons or maybe changed your directional inputs and things like that, you would get a different effect, and it was fun. And so I've seen a few different game designers that have tried to add combinations into tabletop RPGs, and thus far I've only seen one that kind of worked, and even that was a bit of a stretch. It worked, but it was real close to not working. And I think the biggest reason why is to take like the Viper example. All the attacks that you do are on a 2-second global cooldown. So I do one attack, 2 seconds later I do another attack, 2 seconds later I do a third attack. That works really well because you can see the direct result almost instantly. It's boom, boom, boom. When you're talking about combos in a tabletop RPG, what you do on your turn, or once your turn is over, depending on how many other players are there, you might not get another turn for 20 or 30 minutes. And so the thing with combos in general is the idea of, I did this, and that made this cooler, and that made this cooler. And when you have seconds between those things, it's really easy to see the connection of, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. When you have anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes between, okay, this, and then this, and then this, it becomes impossible to see the benefit of the combo, and it just feels like you're doing a completely different attack. And so a Viper style combo system in D&D 5th edition simply doesn't work. It just takes far too long to get through. Now, I do like the idea of combos and stuff like that, because again, it gets away, especially when you're dealing with martials and things like that, where they don't have a plethora of spells to go off of. They just have their attacks. By giving them options of, well, if I did this turn or last turn, I have a different way to attack this turn, that can vastly change how interesting it is to play martials. Like I said, the biggest issue is if the combos are limited to one action you can do on your turn, and then you have to wait till your next turn in order to do the next one. And it's a combo that's effectively just 3 attacks spread out over 3 turns, where you do one, and then you have to do the second part of the attack, and then you have to do the third part of the attack. Well, that isn't fun. And a lot of times, if combat is really, really fast, or for whatever reason, if on your first turn you don't use the first part of your combo, well, you have just set yourself back by an entire turn to get to the good thing, the combo finisher. And there's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to do your initial combo attack right in the first turn. Not to mention, if it is a sequential thing, if there's something that happens that prevents you from doing the second or the third attack, you have to come up with, okay, does that mean that I now have to start over from the beginning? Does that mean that it just waits until the next thing? Because again, there's a lot of different situations that would just stop you from being able to attack one turn, including just the enemy that you were attacking dying and you having to go to a new enemy. So I've come up with a couple different ways that I think if you wanted to put a combo system into a tabletop RPG, I think these would work significantly better. The first, in 13th Age, the monk effectively has a combo system where what it is you have opening moves, like transitional moves, and then finishers. They have actual names for them in 13th Age, and I can't remember what they are. But it's pretty simple to understand. You have your first move, your second move, and your third move. The thing that makes the 13th Age version work, but just barely, is you can mix any opening move with any transitional move with any finisher. And each one is not just I do more damage. Each one has a different effect that happens because you do it. So instead of having, okay, I do combo 1A, combo 1B, combo 1C, which again locks you for 3 turns, you are locked into this is what I have to do. I have no choice. If I want to get the most out of my class, I make a choice in my first turn and it makes the choice for me for the next 3 turns or the next 2 turns. The way that it works in 13th Age is you do your opening attack, and then you can either do another opening attack or you can go to any of the transitional attacks, the secondary attacks that you know. And then after you're done with that, you can either go back and do another opening attack or you can go to the finisher attacks. And each subsequent attack does a little bit more damage. And again, they all have something else that they did to do. So by giving the monk multiple combos that they can choose from, and as they get to higher levels, they get even more, and making it so that they don't have one combo line they have to do, they can mix and match to what they want, it turns it into a little bit more interesting, because that means that you're not so much being forced into a quote-unquote combo chain. What you're doing is you basically have an a la carte board of attacks, and once you make one of those attacks, the a la carte board adds additional things to the menu. And you can go back and just do the original ones, or you have this brand new set of ones. And then when you do that, it adds another set of different things that you can do. So instead of limiting player choice by forcing them to make a decision for one turn that forces them to stick with that for 3 turns, this basically gives you more decisions that you can make, and makes her kind of an interesting class to play. Now, again, the big problem with that is you're going to do an attack one turn, and then it may be 20 or 30 minutes before you get to do your next attack. And by the time your next attack comes around, the combat arena may have changed drastically. The enemy that you are fighting may no longer exist. The arena that you're fighting in may have changed drastically. You know, floors might have fallen, or debris might have been created, or players or enemies may have cast spells or used abilities that create dangerous places on the floor, or places with difficult terrain, stuff like that. So you still run into that problem of, oh shoot, it's a cool idea, but because of how much can change in a single turn, it still means that there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to finish your combo the way that you intended when you started it. There's also the issue of, at least in D&D 5th edition, and to be perfectly honest, I found most tabletop RPGs tend to be relatively similar in this. An average combat encounter lasts anywhere between about 4 to 6 rounds. So each character gets to act somewhere between 4 to 6 times. So if you have a 3-step combo, that means if you do the minimum 4, you are going to have one chance to get an entire combo out in the entirety of combat. And that just doesn't feel good. And if your response is, well, we can just make combat longer, well, that makes combat even more of a slog. Getting through 4 to 6 rounds of combat, again, depending on how many players you have at your table, can easily take an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how complex the combat is. So if you go, well, you know, in order to make combos work, we need to have combats that last for like 9 to 10 rounds. Well, that means your entire session, an average TTRPG session is about 4 hours. That means your entire session is generally going to be a single combat encounter, which I have done that. Especially if you're dealing with a like really, really tough villain that you're fighting, or like an end a game, like big bad evil guy kind of combat. Yes, having combat be the entire session can be fine. But if every single combat you do is that, it's not going to be fun. And facing the BBEG at the end of the game is supposed... Everyone expects it to be longer than average combat. So if your average combat is 10 rounds, does that mean your BBEG combat is 15 or 20 rounds? Does that mean that you have to play 2 to 3 sessions just to finish off the bad guy? It's not really a good solution. So the other idea that I have from a game design perspective, if you wanted to use combos, is effectively cross-player combos, which I can't think of too many tabletop RPGs that have adapted this the way that I'm thinking. Obviously, there are RPGs like, you know, D&D 4th edition. The Warlord could just hand out attacks to other people, and those attacks could be like handing out an attack to a rogue to get them an extra sneak attack, or something like that. So in that idea, that's perfectly fine, but it's not. It doesn't really feel like a combo as much as here I'm letting you do your thing again. What I'm thinking of is effectively an attack from one player we can call it priming an enemy. And then if another player attacks that enemy with a certain kind of attack, it detonates that prime thing and something happens. Could be additional damage, it could be area damage, it could be some sort of debuff or status condition, but that gives you the feeling of combos. And it's kind of similar to how Dragon Age Inquisition works in their combat. Like you can, whenever you put a debuff on an enemy, most of the debuffs can be detonated by using a detonator ability. And things like if they get frozen, if you use a detonator ability, they shatter and they take a crap ton of extra damage. Stuff like that. Effectively doing that in D&D, first of all, or any tabletop RPG, first of all, it encourages players to be more aware of what other players are doing during their turn, which already kind of exists with things like Guiding Bolt. Does kind of require the players to understand, oh, the cleric just hit this guy with Guiding Bolt, I'm going to get advantage on the attack. But as far as quote-unquote combo potential, it feels really like all it is I get advantage, and there's tons of different ways to get advantage. And it doesn't really feel impactful. And it doesn't matter what the second person does. It doesn't make their attack more powerful, it just makes it more likely to hit, and slightly more likely to crit. That's it. It's not really that impressive, to be honest. So, wow, brain just went completely gone. So, it doesn't feel very impactful. And so my idea for like combos, cross-player combos would be there would need to be some kind of priming or whatever you want to call it, attack made by one player. And then another player would have to have an ability that part of it also would detonate that ability. And to me, that sounds really interesting, really fun, very strategic. And the only issue with that comes from the idea of balancing it, because either if you balance entirely around these combos, then it means that anyone that's not performing these combos is going to do significantly less damage, and therefore the deck is going to be stacked against them. If you balance around just regular attacks without the combos, then the combos themselves can become massively game breaking, and basically the same thing happens, only instead of the players being at a disadvantage for not using them, they'll basically feel disadvantaged because the players that do use them are so massively more powerful, and are able to turn even medium encounters into massively simple ones. And the same problem eventually happens, where DMs, in order to make up for that, starts balancing against combos instead of just other attacks that exist. So, yeah, like I said, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think there are ways to implement combo-style mechanics into a tabletop RPG. The biggest issue is the fact that unless you can do multiple combos in the same turn, or like one of the things that 14th Age does is you can actually get abilities as a monk as you level up. One of the choices you can make is something that gives you the ability to skip one part of the combo, which again makes it significantly easier for you to get to the end one, which is the one that's really flashy and cool. So again, I think it's theoretically possible in a tabletop RPG to create a combo style system. Other than 14th Age, and again, 14th Age I don't think does it spectacularly well. It's just the way that they did it is the only example I have of something that's just not massively boring and broken. But other than that, there really aren't a whole lot of combo style of abilities aside from my attack gives my ally a buff of some sort, but nothing that would really require two players to both choose to do something together, as opposed to one player doing something for the benefit of another player, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you like the idea of a combo system in a tabletop RPG? Do you feel that it's too video gamey and you like your more strategic, almost kind of solo focused turns where you can do your turn and not have to focus on what everyone else is doing at the table in order to be able to play your class well? I'm interested to hear your thoughts, so put them in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. And I will see you guys tomorrow, probably after a significant amount of playing Dawn Trail. All right? Bye-bye.